All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Critical Thinking, Second and Third Order of Effect. Today's presentation is hosted by the Prairie Communicators, which is a North Dakota Professional Communicators Southwest District based in Bismarck. My name is Sarah Mutter, and I'm the district chair for our corner of the state. For all of you who aren't familiar with NDPC, our membership is made up of individuals employed in all aspects of communications. We work for businesses, nonprofit organizations, and government agencies, small business owners, and freelancers as well in our group. All our members are committed to the advancement of communications professions, the exchange of ideas, and the recognition and encouragement of our organization's membership. So before I do officially turn things over to Maxine and Rob, I have a couple announcements for you. NDPC is currently accepting applications for a communications contest. To be eligible for the 2023 contest, your work must have been produced in the 2022 calendar year. The early bird deadline is January 18, 2023 at noon. I believe the first entry is $25 and each additional entry after that is $5. After the 18th of January, the contest fees double. So if you're interested in participating, I encourage you to check it out early. Speaking of NDPC, we have a couple openings on our board right now. If you are interested in getting more involved in our communications group, I encourage you to reach out to Tammy Fogel, our state president, or you can contact me to even drop a DM in the chat to me today, and I would be happy to provide you with more information. Today's virtual meeting is part of a series of statewide virtual meetings open to all of our North Dakota Professional Communicators members. These meetings allow our members to learn from individuals outside their community. Next month's virtual meeting will be hosted by the Minot District, and Jill Schramm is on here, and Jill is cooking up a presentation on cybersecurity that I believe features SRT communications. Jill, if you have that date set, feel free to drop it in the chat so people can mark their calendars if they're interested in that topic. And I know the Grand Forks District is working on a February topic, a virtual meeting as well. I'm not sure what that is going to be just yet. So if you want to get out of the office on February 14th, the Prairie Communicators are going to host our next face-to-face meeting. We're going to get together at the North Dakota Housing Finance Agency in Bismarck. We are going to have a session on webcasting with Brandon Detloff, NDHFA's Homeownership Division Director, and Dorothy Lick, North Dakota Bankers Education Director, talking about the webinars their respective organizations host and how they're using those to educate and connect with their membership. So, okay. More information on the activities and events I highlighted can be or will be posted to North Dakota Professional Communicators website. If you're not familiar with that address, I will try to drop that link in the chat so you can go check it out. And so I do have just a couple tech reminders, a couple communications tips for you today. We are using Zoom in its meeting format today. And as you saw, you can, you entered with your cameras off and your microphones off as default. If you do have questions, you are welcome to turn those on. You can also drop comments into the chat, and there's a raise your hand or reactions feature at the bottom of the screen as well. If you're not that familiar with Zoom, roll your mouse over the bottom portion of the screen and the Zoom meeting tools should pop up down there. So before, let me see, we get started, just a quick, I'm going to drop that before I forget, because as we mentioned aging earlier, drop the address of the NDPC website in our chat before I forget, and I will go ahead and introduce our speakers today. Critical thinking is a sought-after skill in the business world and is equally important in our world as crisis communicators. The leaders we work for look to us to be trusted advisors and credible sources, not just people who are on autopilot. Critical thinkers provide you with the skills. Critical thinking provides you with the skills to analyze and evaluate information so you can obtain the greatest amount of knowledge from it. So leading today's discussion on critical thinking are Rob Keller and Maxine Herr. Rob has worked in public affairs and crisis communications for over 40 years. While he's currently retired from the U.S. Army, you won't find much grass, or in this case, snow under Rob's feet. He was the state's lead PIO for the DAPL protests and the deputy PIO for North Dakota's COVID response. He's the president of the North Dakota PIO Association, as you can see from his shirt, and he's been a FEMA crisis communications trainer for more than 10 years. Maxine hasn't clocked quite as many years as Rob. She did work alongside him on public information efforts for the state during the DAPL protests, regional flooding, and the COVID-19 response. Currently, she's a strategic communications officer for North Dakota Parks and Recreation, and is North Dakota PIO Association's vice president, I believe. So Maxine and Rob, you ready to take over?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And if you want to turn on your photos and screen, I know you might be eating or whatever, but for me, when I take a look at the screen, I like to see who I'm talking to, and we want to make this very informative. There's not a slide deck. It's going to be a chat here on basically experiences that Maxine and I have gone through, and it's really going to cover things that I know from the standpoint of when I was looking at everybody that's on here and where you're at, you are already doing critical thinking, but you may not have heard it that way. And then the other piece, second, third order effect is a military technique that we use, which you're using already, but in the military, we use that when a commander is, for example, I've been to two missions to Iraq. And when we go out on combat patrol, we do what is called a risk factor. The commander gets, whether it's the weather, the intelligence report, any sighted positions of the enemy, and he or she will make an assessment and utilizing second, third order effect. How important is the mission? It's important, okay? If we go out on this route at this time at midnight, what are our consequences? So in other words, the commander thinks through every possible situation that can happen, and therefore comes back into the tactical operations center and does a risk assessment to determine the mission that we're given and the risk. And if the risk is too high, we don't go out on that mission. But we do have to accept some risk. We all do. You get in your car this morning, driving to work, snowing, you accept a risk. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. And I'm going to go through it really quick, but I think it doesn't matter whether or not we're communicators in the sense of like Jill as a reporter, others who are working for public relation firms. I'm a retired communicator, public information. It really doesn't apply. In fact, you can actually teach this to your children to help them become better thinkers. So I want to start out with the story. Maxine, any comments before we start from your end there?
No, not yet.
Okay. Maxine and I will intersperse back and forth, but critical thinking is like muscle memory once you learn the technique. And the story I'm going to give you is back I moved here in '86 from Rapid City, and I worked as a news reporter for ABC station, and then I was also worked for the Rapid City Police Department. And during that time, I was a pilot. I was a private pilot. And one of the things that we do as a private pilot, you have to have 40 hours of flight. And in that time, you learn meticulous takeoffs and landings. You practice engine failure. You practice, what if we get caught in the clouds? And the biggest thing we practice is stalls. When your aircraft is taking off and the pitch of the nose is up too high, it cannot have enough wind to go over the wing, and it stalls. And we practiced probably 50 stalls, but we did it at the 5,000 to 7,000 foot level. And so we had a lot of room to recover from that. And you practice over it. I'm thinking, I'm never, ever going to have to use that. And so I flew to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was a 100-degree day, and the airport is a mile high, so 5,000 feet. So the air is very thin, and did our business there. And we took off and got about maybe 25 to 30 feet off the ground, and the stall warning horn came on. And based upon muscle memory, you just react. You lower the nose, you push more throttle in, and you get that plane flying, and then slowly get into your altitude. And that's a skill set that when you learn critical thinking skills, it becomes a routine for you, and it kind of ruins you for life. Okay. I remember taking driver's ed, not driver's ed, but it was defensive driving back in when I was 16. And it taught me the point that I'm thinking ahead, and I'm coming up on I'm driving down the highway and I see a road off the side of gravel road. I'm always thinking, if a car comes out behind that tree, what am I going to do? My mind is always thinking, what if a car comes out? Then I do that. I ride motorcycle. I used to ride motorcycle. I had to give that. But everything I did in a motorcycle, especially with cars, I'm always thinking, if that car pulls in front of me, what am I going to do? And that's where most accidents happen. So anyway, so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about. And a good example of what we talked about, many of you saw the Apollo 13 movie. And that movie, not the movie, I remember that time. I'm 70 years old. And so I remember when Kennedy was shot. Was assassinated. But the Apollo 13 movie, I love Star Wars and all the, that type of thing. But that was classified as the most successful failure. And Gene Kranz, who was in mission control at that time, he says, work the problem, people. If you remember that, work the problem. And so they had not tested any of that on their way back, but they have sharp people to literally work that particular problem. And then we go into, a triage nurse. When something comes in, they analyze the case at hand and decide what order the patients are going to be treated. And we see that, and that's part of their training. You have a plumber. What you describe to them, the problem, they're trying to do thinking before they get there, what the problem is. Firefighters, on their way to the fire, they're analyzing the color of the smoke, the direction of the wind, and all that. Attorneys do that when cases, those type of things. So you make decisions every day. You made a decision to come on to this program and watch the critical thinking posted by Maxine and I. I mean, or get lunch. So you made a decision right there. That was the first order of effect. We're going to talk about the second, third. So have you ever had this happen? When choosing a solution to a problem, we use critical thinking to consider consequences and other details. The better it's developed, the more logical our actions are going to be. Therefore, improving the ability to think critically is a reasonable goal for everyone. In fact, that's why we get paid the high dollars we do, because we know how to critical think. Did you know that robots can easily choose the best solution to a problem? It's happening all the time. And when you turn on your Facebook, the bots in there are determining, oh, they just looked at this, let's give them, but here's they can do problem solving. And why is that? Because robots don't feel emotions. So emotions are the enemy of logic. And what we're talking about in the world that we do, and I know a lot of you do, is logical decisions. Another thing about aircraft, when we get our aircraft ready to fly, and we're in the air, and we're fine tuning it so we can take our hands off the stick, and we turn it on to autopilot. And as long as that autopilot is doing everything it can through the computer to keep that aircraft in the air. Now, here's the thing: it's a robot. It's sensing systems. But if I were to let that robot keep the autopilot on, and we have an emergency when engine goes out, that autopilot is going to do everything it can without emotions to try to keep that plane level, but there's no way that it can take that plane down. We have to take it off autopilot, and we need human interaction to regain control. So as I mentioned, critical thinking is a sought after skill in the business world. I mentioned no matter if you're a photographer, a graphic designer. I'm looking at North Dakota Council on the Arts, Burleigh County with Mary's on there, City of Mandan, Flint Group, State University. I mean, it doesn't matter what field you're in. You are not just a person that's on autopilot. And you probably know people who do autopilot thinking. We've always done it this way. We're going to continue to do it that way, and nothing's really going to change. And they don't think past that first decision. And so, for example, if you were to look at my picture right now, say that this is a photo. I'm right here, and I'm gonna even show you how even in a photo you can practice critical thinking and second, third order effect. So what we try to do in photography, when we're getting ready to put something out on the air or a high resolution photo for the National Guard, we tell people to write everything you see in the photo. I mean, then you start, my background is pretty cluttered. It probably would not make a very good program. I could blur my background, but you're seeing some of the awards, write everything just in your mind, everything that you see. Start to look into the intricate details of what's behind me. You'll notice that the license plates are backwards because of the camera. You start to noticing. And so when you train yourself to look at a photo even, you start to see things that could cause something when you put it out to the public. And then the second person will see what you're seeing, think, and then you think, what do you think is happening in this picture? If this picture were to be frozen, what do you think is happening here? And you may not know that. And then the third one, which is the most important, you got see, think, and wonder. And then you wonder, are there any questions that the person who's viewing this on the newspaper, on TV, or wherever it's at, a book, what are they thinking? What are they wondering about that picture that you did not catch? And then you can then start to fine tune the picture as well. Let's talk about, say, for example, a simple thing. You have a media list, okay? I know Jill probably doesn't have a media list, although she probably has a media list for the Associated Press and on up the chain there. So you're thinking you have a task with building a media list for an up and coming announcement. Could be anything. So you go ahead and you pull out your media list here and you start going through it. And if you start to identify, Jill was a friendly journalist, I'm going to send this to her because they've covered our brand before and they've done such a great job. And then we leave it there. But what if you applied critical thinking to this task that we're going a step further and examining questions such as, why is this announcement important to stakeholders? Why is this announcement important to customers, to the department? We're not on autopilot. We need to think through this. Then you come back, who are the target audiences for this news? What publications do they read? And even going further is, if by putting this press release out, is my agency's narrative evolving into a new and different direction with this announcement? So we tend to think, it takes a little more effort to get into that particular role, but it's really important in our world when we communicate. And so with this example, critical thinking, we're asking you to elevate the task, to take it something more substantive than just a simple media list. People think, well, how can you drill down into this, something we do every day? And we have to. I mean, there's too much at stake to put out the wrong information to the wrong audience. We haven't done our homework. And so it's about using some of those strategic goals. Maxine, anything that you want to add?
Well, something to keep in consideration when, as communicators, we have information, right? We're in the know. We're the ones that have the info. But think about how worthless that information is if we don't get it to who needs to know. Really, we have to think of people are the central vision, right? They are central to our purpose. Right. And if you're not getting them the information, then all it is just you knowing some information, and that doesn't do you any good. It's not knowledge, it's not wisdom for the people that we're trying to reach, so it doesn't go anywhere. So you have to think about your message and who you need to reach, and you really have to think about it critically. And I think we do go on autopilot sometimes. We think, we'll put that on Facebook, we'll send out a press release, we should be good. We'll hit, really? Are you hitting everybody you need to? An example I had when I was at Morton County, there was a tax exemption that we needed to get out to farmers and ranchers. It was really important. They were going to want to get this tax exemption. And our tax director at the time didn't want to spend the money on mailers. That's usually what they would do, is mail out information. He's like, no, let's find some other ways to communicate it. So we tried, we did radio, we had TV doing stories on it, we press release, we put stuff in the paper, all these things. And the response was so low that the following year we had to do mailer. And then we had all kinds of people get the exemption. They actually had to apply for the previous year's exemption because they missed it. So, it's whether it's, you think, whether you're just thinking, well, I would see it if it was in the newspaper and on social media.
Mhm.
You can't think that way. You can't think about how you would see it or how maybe your circle of friends. You have to think of your audience. How are they going to get this information? Because that's ultimately your job.
That's great advice, Maxine. And a lot of times we think our answers that to a concern, it's based upon logic, but sometimes our logic can be flawed. And so when you have to present something to your manager, your editor, it's important. One of the things we do in media training is we help our surrogates, our talking heads, call them spokespersons, to anticipate questions. They have to think in that second, third order effect. I know I'm going to get a question, but I want to take it the next step and the next step. And so that's how we, on our own, we have to work at that particular process to be proficient in critical thinking. So let's do that. Say you have a great idea for a proactive media pitch. We also learn how to pitch our stories for our agencies. I'm looking at all the agencies here, and I see all the branding here. And at some point, you have to pitch what you do. So you draft it up, and you want to send it off to some target audience as soon as possible because its timeline is important. But here's the thing: you got to think critically before you hit that send button. And a lot of times we hit that send button. It's really easy. Get it off our desk. Check off that to-do list. But here's the thing: critical thinking. Is it really timely? Is it really a unique angle? And why or why not is that? What do other agencies have to say about this topic? Is there a quote? Is there a study? I mean, could I include that in my point? Always attributions are important, especially when you're writing a story. What has this person written about recently? Why was it relevant for them? Not relevant? And then the big question I always ask, from being a journalist, I always ask, if I was the journalist writing this story and I received the pitch from Rob Keller, what kind of story would I write? I mean, put yourself in the role of that journalist there. What questions would I ask the interviewer? So, I mean, these are common sense, folks. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But anyway, so data is important too. We have to discern what data is out there. We have to be able to analyze information from multiple sources. In this day and age, in the environment we're living in, fact checking and checking that data before you send it out. I know Maxine and I, during the Dakota Access Pipeline, we could not turn things around fast enough because we had to check it to make sure it was factual. Where did that information, where did that statistic come from? And we have to take responsibility for the accuracy of our work. And as a journalist, and something I always teach, and when you are, even as a journalist or not a journalist, whatever you do, make sure what you send out is accurate. One of the things I always try to do when I have someone going on is the last thing I give to them are the updated facts or the updated numbers, because numbers can easily change. So yeah, I mean, during DAPL, they can make stuff up, and we cannot even battle against that as well too.
Something else I would interject with that too is always thinking of who else needs to know. Anytime I've been in a JIC now, I always make sure there's a big sign on the wall that says who else needs to know. And we learned our lesson at this during DAPL when Governor Burgum took office, and he was much more interested, I'll say, in the communications and the JIC. And he went to he just started as governor. So all the governors go to Washington, D.C. and they have their little meeting with all the governors, do their thing. And the South Dakota governor came to him and had no idea what was going on with DAPL protests. He thought he was seeing, what everybody was seeing in the world. And he's like, what are you guys doing? What's happening? And he had this very negative view of how the state was handling this. And so, of course, Governor Burnham came back to our table right away and said, why have we not been informing the South Dakota government and leadership there as to what we're doing? They've got Standing Rock as part of their reservation on their land as well. And so that was a very humbling experience, as we all of us communicators sat around the table and went, yeah, did anybody talk to the South Dakota governor? No. So, we did. We kind of had this narrow vision of, we're letting the people in North Dakota know, we're getting the information out. That's who our media list was. We had some regional and national, but we weren't thinking about people who might have to answer questions about this as well, that were in leadership or in government positions. So there they were, our next door neighbor, and we completely forgot about them.
We're always learning. We're always learning. I mean, we all make mistakes. Okay, so say you have a press release draft, and you have another person should look at your draft, which is we should always do that. But sometimes I put as someone who knows nothing about it, and what was the essence of that? And if they can't get the essence, I've done a bad job. But having a second or third people watch or read your press release and maybe catch things that you didn't the first time around. And then you get it back and they might accept it all. And they look at everything looks great and all that. This is what, and then you go ahead and send it out. This is probably one of the most dangerous examples of autopilot. You think you got it back, everybody checked off on it. And then, or they make edits, and those edits are other under one word, you can hit it, then you can incorporate it right into your original document. But I want you to think about critical thinking on that one is, do I actually agree with those edits? And are they even correct? We assume because we let another professional look at it. Once again, once I send it out, I'm responsible for the accuracy of it. Does the person reviewing have the ability or to be familiar with the situation? Are the edits necessary? So those type of things. And then the first step towards critical thinking in your agency involves having a culture of critical thinking. It's not just you as the communicator, but your agency should all be taught how to use critical thinking, because it's going to involve a lot of taking a look at, if we do this, then this might happen tomorrow. It might happen 3 days from now. It might never happen, but we've looked into that crystal ball and we've done the, like Maxine F, what if, who else needs to know? And so one of the challenges facing leaders who find themselves in organizations in a crisis scenario, because when I teach crisis communication, we talk about 95% of the time, and probably all of you would agree with this, 95% of the time is spent in doing routine things, things that you've done before, and it's kind of autopilot. We all get caught up in that. But the 5% that I train to is the 5% when everything hits the fan. I don't have time to build relationships. I don't have time to do processes. We need to respond because we now, what we do in our world in crisis communication, the government, is life, limb, and property. We have people's lives that are on the line, and I don't have time to create a media list. So those things that need to be done. And so they rely upon their individual and collective thinking skills and are put to the test. And we all know, we all have deadlines. Time is a key factor. If we're pressed to work a deadline, for me, when I was a public information officer for the North Dakota Guard, everything happened on Friday at 5 o'clock. I don't know. I mean, right, Maxine? Maxine was a reporter, and she probably called me at 5 o'clock. You sent this press release out. But it's that where this is important, it's that pressure, that the decisions you need to make under pressure. And that can change the whole dynamics of a person operating under pressure. You all know what your pressure points are, that when you have that something happen, you got to get away from the job, you got to do whatever it is that you do to handle that. Now, some communicators are moved from business as usual to crisis mode. I'm that type of person. I have no problem turning over to something going along or some, here's a crisis. On my watch at the National Guard, we had 12 killer in action, 12 happened on my shift. I was eating Thanksgiving in Spearfish. We had a call. We had a cat casualty. I immediately went into crisis mode and started doing what I had learned by the old-fashioned way. And so a lot of us are trained in that way. I know Maxine's trained that way and others, but for many people on your staff, when a crisis hits, it's like they're staring at a blank sheet of paper. I don't know what to do. How do I blend my style of approach into this high pressure piece that's coming down? And that's where agencies can excel at, because now we got to realize if we don't make a decision and the right decision for our company, we're going to lose this brand. We've all solved problems in our communications career, but realize that we then accidentally create more problems by putting out that particular press release, making that statement. And now we're going to jump into second, third order effects. And the military training that I had, Max and I will pass on to you, but I think we'll take a few seconds here to just do a little quick assessment here. Anyone have any questions? Anything? I mean, I'm just trying to get a judge here. Is it something that you have been practicing, critical thinking, or maybe it was critical evaluations? But I mean, it's a lot of people I'm finding, outside of the type of world we're in, don't practice critical thinking. Any questions? Any comments, Maxine, as we go on to? I don't know. You probably never heard the term second, third order effect before you met me. Not before you met me.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
well, and I think we need, even just not even work related sometimes. I mean, this is work related, but it's just in general, it would do us all a big favor if we would think more critically about responding to people. You got to think about people's personality. You got to think about what people have been through. We were just having a discussion with my team at work a week or so ago. There we had a staff member who just came to a meeting, and she was just really just complaining about a lot of things and doing a lot of, well, this will never work and that one, kind of negative. And I said, well, at least she feels candid enough to share that with you. At least she feels safe here. Like she feels safe to tell you this, because that's something, and so you try to take the best approach to things and kind of see how people respond. There was another example I was thinking of with, so, when we see something on social media, like maybe it was a meme somebody created or something, and as an agency, you're like, oh, that would so work. I could make that work for my agency. And so you just use it. Recently, I found out about somebody in an agency in North Dakota who she had done that. They saw something that one of their counterparts in another state had done. And so they copied it, and lo and behold, that other state was all bent out of shape because they stole it. Now in North Dakota, I don't know about you guys, but I'd be so flattered. They're like, look, they took my stuff and made something of their own. I would think that was great, but we don't all see things the same. So, being able to think critically of, if you see something like that and you want to borrow it, go get permission first, those types of things.
Yep. I gotta say though, it's really, Max and I, you probably are aware that some of you are already members of North Dakota Public Information Officer Association. And I'm glad we have so many associations, IABC, NDPC, and ABC and CBS. All the communications out there, but it's really great because we all have the same interest and have our different career tracks on that. But it was really, when I first met Maxine, she came into DAPL in probably the second or third month. And it was, it's really became a great friendship because she's strong in areas I'm weak in and vice versa. And that's when you put a team together, we're going to talk about this. I know all of you I'm looking at here have egos. I know you do. You're not in the career if you don't have an ego at some point when communications. However, when we come together in a crisis situation for example, and Sarah and others, have you been involved in my jigs? First thing we say when you come through the door, check your ego. Just throw your ego out the door, because we're going to get to work, and I don't care about your ego. All I caring about, we have to get the information out to the public. And so this is going to be some of the things, the critical thinking. Teach your kids that. For every decision that they make, there's a second, third order of effects. And we talked about DAPL. Maxine, we have the meetings, the leadership meetings. Why don't you just talk a little bit about that piece right there, about what you experienced with second, third order effects, and then we'll go into the definition.
You mean those green team meetings?
Yeah, the leadership meetings, right?
Well, yeah, we so when the leadership would meet during DAPL, and now understand, when you're in this for months and months and months, you get to a point where everybody's exhausted. You have leadership who just wants to get the job done, and they're not always thinking about those second and third order effects. And that's why we always made sure we had a PIO in the room, someone who could think about the optics of things or how things were playing out. And there was a classic example of this was at pretty much the end, when we were looking, when they were moving out of the camp, and we knew they were going to have this huge amount of cleanup. They just so much stuff to clean up over there, so much garbage, but also just structures they built and all these things. Well, they had teepees out there. And so when they decided they were going to bring in these, garbage companies to have with these big dumpsters. And they were like, we're just throwing it. We're not going to try to go through anything. We're just throwing everything away. And someone said, what about the teepees? We're just throwing everything away. That was the response, really quick. Like, no. We're waving our hand over here as PIOs. Please don't let us have an image of a teepee sticking out of a dumpster when the state is cleaning up. So, obviously after that, we said that, they're like, oh yeah, of course we wouldn't, we want to do that. Now, granted, the teepees that were out there, they weren't, the ones that they were leaving behind really weren't worth, there wasn't the value in them that the genuine teepees were. These were just, stuff that they stuck together. But nonetheless, trying to think about how this is going to look. You've got to make sure you're not creating a bigger problem than you already had to begin with. So it was really important to have communicators in the room when the leadership was talking, because part of it was they relied on us, and they did finally get to a point where they would be discussing something and they would look at us and like, how do you think that sounds? Or how do you think that would work? So that meant a lot, because initially, I think, Rob, when you guys started, they really weren't even letting you in the room.
No.
They changed their tune real quick.
Yeah. And that's why Maxine brought up a great point. If you are in any of the high level meetings in your brand and your agency, you should have someone from communications in there to be doing that second, third order effects, thinking that if you implement this sales program, here's what it's going to do to this department over here. Are you aware of that? A lot of times in our ambition to do something, we forget that the other pieces are going to have that residual effect. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So have you ever solved a problem, then realized you created 5 new problems? That's part of my wife and I being married. I solve a problem and 3 more crop up. She reminds me of it, and I'd never even thought about that. So that's why it's important that we think about second, third order consequences. And the goal of that is to accurately weigh the true cost and benefits of a proposed solution. That's why we said we get paid the big bucks by thinking about potential, the side effects and the other effects up front, more or less looking into your crystal ball if you can do that. And so second and third order consequences are the downstream ramifications of your actions. Everything you do as an opposite and equal and opposite reaction. We've heard that. When you change part of a system in your organization, that change can impact other parts of the businesses, people's processes as well. And And so we never know what that is going to be if we don't give it thought on that as well too. And if we don't do it right, you might end up with a complex and very messy situation that you have to clean up down the line. And your boss says, boy, if only we would have thought about this at that time. And all of a sudden, there you go.
Well, this takes a lot of discipline too, because when you're in a crisis in particular, it's so easy to get tunnel vision and just, okay, we have to take care of this problem. This is what we're dealing with right now. And you don't typically think about what's coming up next, or what's the story we need to tell, or, okay, yes, we're in the middle of this, we're trying to put out these fires, but these fires are affecting 2 or 3 people or situations down the road. What are we looking at for that? Because otherwise you're just constantly putting out fires. You're never actually ahead of yourself. So you're always, always be thinking of what story is coming out next. What story do we need to tell, so we can get ahead of the narrative later on?
Yeah, and second, third order consequences are not always obvious at first glance. We have to be trained at it. When we zoom out and we can see the big picture, and we can see what happens down the line, we can see hidden costs, we can see potential things that could possibly happen. When we've got that, we now become addition to the leadership team to think through those processes that are coming down. I know we're running up in time here. I'm gonna look through some of my notes here.
There's a question in the chat, Rob, if you want to address that one.
Any ideas effectively helping top leaders pause long enough to consider or listen to second, third order way of thinking insights? Often they are in an execute mode. Don't want to stop long enough to listen to the concerns that we identify. Exactly what happened during DAPL. And it takes, as a communicator, you're this super person. You remember, like on some walls, you have a wall with a glass insert in it, and they break glass upon emergency, and there's a fire extinguisher in there. A lot of agencies believe that if I have a problem, I'm going to call the PIO team, and they're going to help us out of this. That has gone by the wayside. That's why, but you almost have to prove a way that you are valuable to those decisions. Not that we help make decisions, but we have to be there to offer up those decisions and not let that say, oh, if I say something negative to the boss, they're going to appreciate that. And many times I had to go into Governor Hoban's office on a situation that was happening and brief him and help him write talking points. I said, sir, if we say this, then I can pretty well guarantee that the news tomorrow is going to say this. And once you start to realize the value that you play in that, but that's a good question. Brenda, that's going to be a tough question. It's almost a cultural thing I talked about before. Maxine, any comments on that?
But I think you need to tap into their common sense a little bit. I mean, like you talked about, Rob, it's
right.
If you can give examples of, if we do this, then this could happen, or, this is how the media is going to trust me. This is how the media is going to look at this if we say it like that. Maybe it's the idea of, yes, you're executing, you're in the midst of it, and that's one paint swipe, and you're swiping paint, and you're in the room, and you're swiping paint, and you're swiping paint, and pretty soon, where are you? In the corner. You painted yourself into a corner, and you have no way out except to step in all that goo on the way back up. So find those ways to just, give them just an example of, I can appreciate you're wanting to execute this, and this is how you want to go, but trust my experience and professionalism and knowing that I've seen this happen before. Or I could say an example from a colleague that this is what happened. So we want to alleviate that. We don't want that to happen to us.
Brenda, I think a good example that came to my mind, and I mentioned I'm a space kind of guy and all that. I remember when the shuttle Challenger blew up, all because of a seal when it was cold, and there were many technicians and scientists that said we need to put a hold on the launch because the temperature is too cold, causing rubber rings to not, and because management was under a deadline to get that shuttle launched because they had people paying good money to have items on that going up to the International Space Station. We all know what happened on July 28th, 1986. It blew up. And as a result of that accident happened, it changed the entire outlook of NASA, because everyone who saw an issue or a problem had the opportunity to take it up to the chain, and a investigation was done before it moved on. It slowed down the process, but they learned from serious mistake. And so, you know what, you don't want to say, I got you there, I told you so. But Brenda, that might be something you need to take a look at, something in the past that happened that had you had vision of that and being able to help offer some ideas on how that would have changed. So, okay. Okay, let me move on here. You don't always have to save second, third order effects for big decisions. And so to get started, here's 4 questions. I'm holding up 4. Have 4 questions that you might want to write down. To get started in second, third order effects, ask yourself, who else might be impacted? That's a good example there. Who else? Is it not just us, but when you look at it and look at it critically, who else is going to be impacted? Then the other one, what parts of our business might be affected? I mean, could this bring sales down in our sales department? Is this going to really build up our research and development, our R&D? And then the third one is, what new problems might this solution create? I mean, it might be for some of those new problems that are out there we never thought about until we started practicing second, third order effects. And here's the most important one. And this is one that you could teach your kids. And then what? I use that with my kids all the time. They said, Dad, we want to go ahead and do this. We want to build this. Okay, that's good. And then what? Then we go along and, okay, we're building this decision, like he wants to get a license for a car. Okay, and then what? And so we train our children, we train, our folks to be able to understand these are the consequences if we do not do it the right way. So what else might be impacted? What parts of the business might be affected? What new problems might this solution create? And then what? So I'm going to, Sarah, how much time do you want, or when do you want to? Sarah, are you there?
I am. I had to unmute myself. We've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
Feel free to, keep going with your critical points, Rob. And if folks have to drop off, they can drop off. We are recording today's session. So if you miss something at the end because you have to go to another meeting, you can watch the recording later. And I will send out those handouts as well later.
Okay. Good. We have some good questions here and too. So, okay, we're coming in for a landing. So critical thinking skills, you make decisions every day. When choosing a solution to problem, we use the thinking process called critical thinking to consider consequences, details, etc. And you start to develop these thinking skills and more logical actions. I have a 13-year-old granddaughter who loves to play chess. And if you look at any people who play chess, they are thinking 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. I can't bring my mind to think second, that. But chess is a great example of critical thinking that you can use. So here are the, I've got really 6 really quick ones here. Number 1, gather information. And we do that all the time. Before making a decision, familiarize with the data that's out there, research it. If you miss a small detail, the consequences may be irreversible. The O-ring was too frozen. A small detail became tragedy. And gather as much information as possible to weigh the pros and cons, because you can do that as well too. And like I mentioned at the beginning, combat patrol in Iraq, you weigh the pros and cons, the risks that you have to take, what was the mission and all that. But we always let the weatherman, the intelligence, always let the commander know what those issues were, and that commander made that final decision. Develop logic. Rational thinking is extremely important. Will make your life much easier to rationally think. Creative thinking can be a useful tool in many other ways than just to solve a problem in our day-to-day life as well. Compare and analyze. We have to have the ability to draw analogies. We don't need to reinvent the wheel that's already out there, but perhaps the situation that you have is not unique. The solution has been invented already. You just need to do the research to find out what it is. Casual relationship, realize that there is always cause and effect. Everything we do, cause and effect. And understanding this allows us to calculate the choice and eliminate the least minimal idea that it's going to have a problem. And we're going to make mistakes in that, but we're giving it some critical thinking. Forecasting, you know, you all know your business. You know what it is that you do. Simply, it's taking into account all the factors, from sales to the department to whatever. And it allows you to find the best option based upon your particular brand and how your situation, how your agency operates itself. And then priorities. Getting your priorities right is probably one of the most important skills in itself. It allows you to find the best option. And it's still worth considering that not all people have the same priorities as I do. And so that's important as well too. So they were gather information, develop logic, compare and analyze, casual relationships, forecasting, and priorities. So I know that we look here, search. Thanks, Maxine, for sending that out as well. I hope that this has really helped get you thinking along that. It's, you know, when you're in our type of situation, sometimes we need to make a decision and we need to make it now. And I know from being a newbie years and years ago, I didn't have that skill set. I had to learn it. I had to learn it the hard way. I made so many mistakes along the way, but every mistake I learned, I theoretically fell forward so that when I get back up, I'm 3 or 4 steps closer to my goal. There's a saying that I teach, and it goes along with this critical thinking. And it goes like this, and 3 things that I teach all the agencies, if you can follow, you're going to be successful. Here's what happened. All of you have situations that have happened in your department agency, and you have stakeholders, you have customers, you have patients, whoever. You need to let them know, here's what happened. Second one, they want to know, here's what we're doing. What is your agency doing to protect the cybersecurity that was just compromised on our business? Here's what happened. Here's what we're doing. They want to know, is there implementations in place? Is there places so we don't have to worry about public PII? And the third one is the most important is I need to let the public know, here's what we want you to do. Patients, customers, you need to shelter in place, boil your water. Here's what happened. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we want you to do. And that's the reason why those of us in government type communication, crisis communication, that drives our whole life of life, limb, and property. Yours might not be that, but you have an agency, thousands or millions of dollars behind your company, and editors, stockholders, all that. That's all the same thing. And so this has just been a tidbit of what critical thinking is. I'm probably Max, I'm probably more, I've got a lot of lifelong of experiences, and my wife said I should be slowing down and writing those experiences in a book or something. So, but anyway, Sarah, thank you so much. And those of you who stayed on, I really appreciate it. I love seeing faces as well, because I love interacting. And so Maxine, any closing comments? I appreciate all that you do.
Just to practice this sort of thing is simply just taking a couple minutes every day. I mean, we're all probably reading the news, we're probably all looking at articles about things. Take a look at stories of, oh gosh, that could happen to my company or to my agency. How would I handle that? Or did they handle it well? What would I have done differently? You know, even if you just take a couple minutes, because it just kind of keeps your brain thinking that way and sharp when it comes to if something like that should happen to you or your agency, how would you handle it?
Yep. Thank you all. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
I do not have any more announcements today, other than, like I said, we will send a link to the recording and the resources that Rob and Maxine referenced out as soon as we're able to get those online. And I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us today and thank Rob and Maxine for sharing today and leading today's discussion. Again, we have another virtual meeting coming up in January, and do follow NDPC's website and social media accounts so you know what we've got going on. And if you have questions, you're welcome to reach out to me or reach out to any of our board members. So thank you much, everyone.
Thank
Take care.
you.